government, so the official national measure of poverty is based on consumption, so household monetary value of consumption, of their consumption. However, since its first inception, the measure in the 1980s, the legitimacy of the use of this measure based only on the monetary value of consumption has been questioned. Even by the professor who actually proposed the measure, Professor Sayogyo, who said that these consumption numbers can only paint half the picture of the complexity of poverty. But in that time, we didn't have much data, so we technically only had data on consumption, and mostly on rice consumption. But now we do have a lot of data, so I'm saying we need to do more. And Martin Nussbaum, I think, was even more harsh in saying that in using just GDP per capita, for a long time, economists, policymakers, who work on the problems of the world's poor nation, told people a story that distorted human experience. So I'm saying that we need supplementary measures, maybe not substitutes to consumption, but things that can enrich policy more. So my aim was to construct a multidimensional measure of poverty as a supplement to the existing consumption measure, using sense capability approach as a conceptual framework. So what my aim was to find which dimensions and indicators of poverty are relevant for the people of Indonesia, and how should they be weighted one against the other. So my theoretical background is the capability approach, which says that measurement should be based on the real freedoms, the beings and doings that people actually value. Not only consumption as a proxy of those beings and doings. But then identifying these various dimensions and indicators, and also the second question, which is how should we aggregate them into an index of poverty, posed a lot of challenges for me, and I think for most poverty researchers nowadays, and then and this is my proposed way of trying to mitigate those challenges. I mean, it's a crude way, but as Sen would say, at least we should do something, even though it's not perfect. So I used a mixed method approach, coupling qualitative results with quantitative analysis at the end. So within the qualitative methodology steps, I did interviews and focus group discussions at 3 levels. So at the national level, meaning I interviewed policymakers, government officials, ministers who were directly involved in Indonesia's poverty alleviation projects. And then I chose one. Indonesia is so huge, and in a month, so I had a month in Jakarta with the national policy makers, and a month in the field with the district level and village level respondents. So I had to choose one province out of 34 provinces, and one district out of 514 districts. So I couldn't cover everything. So at the district level, I interviewed district heads of the Puskesmas, which is the government public health system, and also because I focus on Bali, which I will argue for later, I interviewed community leaders and the farming organization and agricultural organization heads. And for the village level, I interviewed community members, but they were all under the government consumption poverty line. So their consumption, monthly household income was under the line. So I chose Bali. It might be a random choice, but I only had a month, and I'm from Bali, so I had a lot of access to the community, and I could form focus group discussions in a relatively short amount of time. So I did purposeful sampling. It was hard to kind of get people together to form like 7 or 8 member focus group discussions. I figured out after being a week in the field that people group together according to work occupation type. So the farmers grouped together, and then the fishermen grouped together, and they were, and then there's like food sellers and fish sellers grouped together. And I just used those formed groups and set up focus group discussions, of course, at the relevant time, so I didn't kind of disrupt their schedule. Because for them, 2 hours of non-working means a lot of unearned income that could possibly support their family for a couple of days. So Bali, even though headcount-wise, this is MPI, which is the multidimensional poverty index, which is developed here in Oxford by OFI. This is their MPI results for 2007. Actually, now they have, I think, 2011, I think, that's the newest, using the HS data. So here we can see that incident of poverty, which is just the head count, number of poor people according to the MPI, divided by total number of population. So Bali has 12.6% poor. But if you look closer at the A, which is the average intensity across the poor, meaning out of the 10 of the MPI dimensions, covering health, education, and standard of living, people who are poor in Bali are poor in nearly half of those dimensions, so 5 out of 10. So they're experiencing very intense poverty. My aim was to discover whether the dimensions that was covered by the MPI actually covered the whole of the dimensions that were relevant for people. Actually, my aim was people in Indonesia, so I was asking them, as a citizen of Indonesia, what do you think are the relevant dimensions of? I had to use welfare because I did a couple of pilot tests, and every time I asked them what are the dimensions of poverty, they're like, who are you calling poor? So I couldn't use the word poverty. So I had to ask them, what are the dimensions of welfare that were important for their lives? And of course, I had the dilemma of who should I listen to? And I argued for the 3 levels. So government officials, national and district level, and of course the people themselves, the most important people. These are just examples of the interviews that I did. There are a lot of pictures of me, but I want you to focus on the people who helped me with my research. These are my national and district level interviews. I interviewed the head of the demographic department in the University of Indonesia, and that is Professor Doro Jatun Kuncoro Jati, who was Minister of Social Affairs, and he is still very active in poverty alleviation in Indonesia. And the one on there is the head of the SUBA, which is the Farming Association. So, and then these are the focus group discussions. These are examples of focus groups with women, with fishermen, and then when I figured out the dimensions, I asked them which dimensions were relevant, and then I also asked them to rank them according to their importance. So which dimensions were important than the other. And then I matched the dimensions that they told me were important with data available within the SUSANAS, which is the National Socioeconomic Survey. And then I used the M0 methodology. I don't think I have time to tell you what it is, but it was developed here in the Oxford Poverty and Human Development Initiative. And basically, it enables you to incorporate a lot of dimensions, like health, education, and everything, and not just focus on one, into a single measure, and it also allows you to aggregate those dimensions into one index using those weights. And the findings were that there were areas that the 3 levels agreed on, and there were also a lot of areas where they didn't agree on. For example, I would say the most striking one is the environmental variable. So people on the ground, the community levels, because they were working as fishermen, they found it very important for us to be aware of environmental degradation. But at the national level, they were more focused on like macro, like inflation or price fluctuations. And then, so these were the list of the dimensions that everyone thought was important, so out of the 3 stakeholders. And then because like limited time and everything, I only focused on the dimensions that intersected, so that everyone agreed on to build my actual final index. And then I asked them to rank them. So which one was more important? I guess the next. And then I had another hurdle, which was the Susanas doesn't encompass everything. It only encompassed, out of those 10, it encompassed 5 of the dimensions. And these were the dimensions that it actually had data on, which was health, education, assets, social relations, and access to credit. And of course, they're also kind of crude dimensions. And those were the indicators that I used within the dimensions. And these are the weighting schemes. So here, so from weighting scheme 1 and weighting scheme 2, that was the results from the interviews and the focus group discussions when I asked them which dimension was more important towards the next. So for example, if they say health, health would be weighted higher within the index. But then I didn't ask them specifically to kind of say the weight, for example 0.5 or 0.3. So I tried different weighting schemes and did robustness tests. But the results I'm going to display are just the results for equal weights. So each dimension was, well, it's a hypothetical result if each dimension was valued equally. And this is the difference between, I call the index Indonesian People's Index, and the red line is national consumption poverty line, provincial poverty line, and the blue bars are the IPI headcount rates. So there are significant differences. And here you can see the breakdown of the 10 indicators that were included within the index. And you can see, for example, in Aceh, poverty mostly is because of sanitation, something like that. And then I did robustness checks with the weighting schemes, which is that I weighted the indicators differently, and I tested whether each province was then ranked differently. So whether Aceh was, with weighting scheme 1, ranked as 3rd most poorest, and with weighting scheme 2, whether it was ranked maybe 5th or something. And I did Pearson correlations of the ranks to see whether, if I changed the weighting scheme, was there a significant difference? And because they are highly correlated, it means that from one weighting scheme to the next, the position of Aceh as a province doesn't differ significantly. And then that's it. And I'm ending the presentation with a quote from the head of the Subak organization in Bali. And he said that, "I'm not rich in the same way. I do not own material goods, yet through my courage, determination, and intelligence, I succeeded. And courage and intelligence are what have led me to happiness, not the land that I don't own, and the coins I can't spend." So, thanks everyone. I'm ready for questions.
Thank you. It's interesting how sure it's meaningful endeavor in looking at the multi-dimensional property, and I'm looking forward to see the entire results of the research. It's very interesting. I have a comment actually, and I would like to hear you more. First is, in Indonesia we have 2 different indicators. The first one is for the official statistical records, which is based on the consumption as you mentioned. And the second one is for the purpose of targeting, which is now set at the 40% of the lowest percentage. So the first comment is, how feasible in terms of political or logistical for the government to adopt the multi-dimensional index as a substitution for the official reports of the official method. And the second one is, how do you relate your findings or your work in progress with the 40% lowest percentile?
Well, the first one, thank you so much for your questions. They're really interesting, and I need to really think about them when I write up my thesis. So the first one was how can the government implement it, It's actually really interesting. But when I was reading about the history of poverty measurement in Indonesia, and I'm truly grateful for being here, and the library access is so amazing. And I have the chance to read the history of measurement from the 1800s and how it was actually done. And throughout the years, we were actually thinking of poverty as a multidimensional concept. Even the BKKBN family planning measure, that's multidimensional, and it uses a counting approach which Atkinson came up with here, and we came up with it in Indonesia too. That's multidimensional, and it's been going on since, I think, after the crisis, because that was implemented for the Gamian Economy Social, I think. So we have done it. It can be done. Although I think what would be costly is just gathering the opinions. The World Bank actually has done it through the Voices of the Poor, and it specifically focused on Indonesia, and it also did similar focus group discussions as what I did, and I was actually modeling the focus group discussion model on the Voices of the Poor reports. It can be done, and I'm trying to develop an easier way of gathering opinions. During my PhD research, it's still very, very preliminary, but I'm trying to develop a way of actually doing it in a more effective and cost-reducing way. And also by learning from the UK minimum income requirements and David Hirsch's work here. So hopefully it can be done. I'm optimistic. And how to relate this with the PMT. The PMT, as you said, is used for targeting, and consumption and this kind of thing is probably more used for evaluation. The thing with the PMT is it only, I guess, the survey it uses is different. It only surveys people who are considered poor, so 40% under that line. And the survey that it uses also, I don't know, I don't have access to the addresses of the people, because that's very sensitive data. You can have access for the PMT data, but you can't access the addresses of the people. So you can't do some sort of ground reality check and recheck them or something. I don't know, this doesn't answer your question, but during my DPhil, actually, I kind of firstly aiming to compare these measures. But because they're using different data sets, and I'm mostly using the Susanas, like the consumption measure and this MPI both uses Susanas, and it interviews both people who are poor and non-poor, so I can compare the differences between them. The PMT survey only surveys the bottom 40%, so I mean, it would be an amazing topic of research, but I currently decided to kind of, because I was originally wanted to kind of compare it, but then actually you're right, because using the PMT, they also figured out indicators and dimensions of poverty. But
just you can check actually if you go to the field and see the beneficiaries, because the beneficiaries were listed after the PMT targeting was done, so you can actually check. Just go to the beneficiaries.
I guess maybe a way of actually maybe comparing the measures is using the PMT indicators that they came up with the property test methodology, and they also came up with weighting, and testing the indicators that they came up with that compared to using the Susanas data set also compared with the indicators that I came up with from the people and whether there are differences. So I guess I might consider doing that. But thank you very much for that.
Thank you. I just have a short question, but I find it very interesting. You mentioned several factors that you used in your measurement. But food, access to food was
yeah.
not one of them.
Yes.
How can you,
Yeah.
what do you say, what's your
There's
thought
a
on
lot of
that?
people who actually noticed that too. I think it's because I focused on Bali. In Bali we have a system of sharing food. It's not a written system or a law, but it's just, you know, the way of life and tradition. I think I talked about this with my college professor who is doing research on inequality reducing and inequality regulating institutions. And he included this as one of those institutions. Through our tradition of ceremonies, like Bali is full of ceremonies and we call it temple birthdays. Every month there would be a minimum of 2 or 3. It's a lot of work, but everyone goes to the temple and shares food. It doesn't matter how much you share, you just share, like 1 apple is okay. And then after the festival, we all eat together. So in Bali, we don't have a problem of nutrition, deficiency or malnutrition or anything like that. But if I went to Eastern Indonesia, that would definitely be an issue. But thank you for noticing that. More questions?
Yeah, I enjoyed that, thank you. I was wondering, to what degree does using focus groups lead to a sort of some participatory exclusions? So who dominates the focus groups and who gets missed out?
Thank you very much also for your question. So I was thinking also of whether, you know, of course, kind of thing with including only women or men, and I decided to do separate and then do one with men and women to see the dynamics of men and women. But I found, all the dimensions and ranks that they came up with were consensus, so they agreed upon that. And of course, for some of the women, I had to kind of encourage them to speak, of course, and voice their opinions. But overall, with the men, because the internal characteristic of the Subak and the Fishermen Association is democratic, so nobody has a higher standing within the Subak. For example, the Subak head, he doesn't own land, but they chose him as a Subak head. It's entirely democratic, so I didn't have a problem with nobody dominated the discussion with that. But I also did robustness checks with the results of the FDDs by re-interviewing the people within the FDDs and also re-interviewing other people, not re-interviewing, so interviewing other people within the community. So I had like 10 people from the Subak, but then there were of course some people who didn't join into the discussion. So I just re-checked with them to see whether the first couple of indicators or dimensions were the same as the group results and whether they ranked them in the same way. So I did that as a kind of crude robustness check. So this was through all that. Thanks. More questions?
I have a very naive question. As an anthropologist, so I'm not used to this methodology. But dealing with issues related to poverty, one of the major concerns is that people feel poor and or don't feel poor, or feel poor and aren't poor, or they feel something and not the other, or in the context and then not in another, at home. Or did you consider this perception? I know that in the indicators and the World Bank and all the rest, the perception of poverty is a big issue. It's maybe the issue. Did you consider it?
Thank you so much. I sort of considered it by meaning that so what you mean I think is probably like relative poverty. Like if you interview, if I'm right, if you interview someone in a very, very rural village, then their idea of like a full life would probably be different. Like if I interview people in Jakarta, people would need televisions and stuff like that, and they kind of measure their level of poverty relative to the community that they are surrounded in. and I could only select one community. So I selected purposefully, it's a village community, but it was located close to the major town. So Bali is North Bali and South Bali. I focused in North Bali, but because there are very high inequalities there, and but this village that I chose was in close proximity to the capital of North Bali, which is Singaraja. It was 10 minutes to the capital. They had access to, well, although they only had a KFC just when I came there, so they just had a KFC there. But I chose this village with the idea that, I mean, they live in a village, but they have kind of conception of like the need for education or the need for like doctors and healthcare and stuff like that. But if I interview, which is ideally, I'll have to go for it to be representative of Indonesia, people in rural, very, very rural areas. It would be very interesting to know how different their conceptions of poverty are. Yeah. So thank you very much for that.
Still have 3 minutes left. One more question.
Thank you for providing this in-depth analysis. But, there is also an issue about the migrants in Indonesia. Like internal migration in Indonesia is huge, and researching and focusing on people originally living in the islands, I think it's not enough. How about migrants that live in Bali in this case?
Thank you so much. It's amazing that you guys came up with a lot of the issues that actually I experienced within the field. And this is actually also very interesting for Bali's case, because I also interviewed a youth group, a focus group with youth. So 18, I didn't focus on like school year children, because I didn't apply for QREC 2, because focusing on children. So I focused on 18 to 25-year-olds. And your issue on migration came up with these youngsters because most of them either migrated to Jakarta or something, or worked in cruise ships in Bali. But the thing about Bali is I couldn't include, it's too much. I only had 2 weeks, but I collected so much data. But the issue about migration and how that influenced how they viewed poverty. It was really interesting for Bali because of this tradition. I hope this will be clear, but because of this tradition of family temples, within that youth group, I could interview people who were thinking of migrating, and also youngsters who migrated and came back. Because we have that connection with our family temple, no matter where we go, we have to come back during the family temple birthday. So it was so interesting to have both these perspectives, people who were living in the village but wanting to migrate out, and people who have migrated out and then came back. And there were differences in opinions, of course, within that youth group. But in general, they valued stuff more rather than, of course, their parents who were agriculturists. They valued things like being able to speak a second or third language, English, French, or Chinese. They highly valued that, but I couldn't, of course, include it because they weren't any indicators within the Susanas. But yeah, that came up. It's very interesting. Thank you.
And what about other migrants that come to Bali and live here, like the Muslims who are not able to, like, for example, participate in the ceremonies?
Yes. That's actually also interesting. In Singaraja, North Bali, there is a very big Muslim community and also a very big Christian community. And my dad, he works in interfaith dialogue, so he is very close with both communities. I didn't have time to include everyone within the focus group discussions, but that would be I thought of it, of including different people from different communities within Bali, but that's probably I'm going for field work in June, I'll think of that definitely. But when you say the Muslims aren't included and the Christians aren't, they are actually they are. In Bali we have a saying, Nyama is brother or sister. Every time we have a celebration, anyone can come eat. And we know Muslims can't eat pork. We have veggie meals for our Nyama Islam, which is Islamic brothers and sisters. So, I mean, Bali is an interesting area in itself. It's I guess we have to do like loads of research questions from that. Like even from working with my college supervisor on inequality, like regulating institutions. It's just Well, we're going to film a documentary on one of the they're not rituals, but they're ceremonies. And hopefully it'll be uploaded in one of his websites or something, and then I can send you guys the link or something. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now is the second presenter, Pak Teguh. You have 20 minutes for presenting your results. And
Okay, thank you very much, Rifa. Today I would like to share my working in progress about social assistance, corruption and inequality in Indonesia. I'm Teguh, I'm from the University of Indonesia. This is my outline. I would like to share about the motivation of study, theoretical framework, studies facts about social assistance, corruption and inequality in Indonesia, and also empirical evidence and concluding remark and the way forward. This is my motivations. Yes, in Indonesia the poverty rate is decreased massively, but the problem is inequality substantially increased from 0.33 in 2002 become 0.4 in 2014. Yes, the report for World Bank in 2015 said that Indonesia rising divide and high inequality. There is issues on ethical issues and also collective action, social protest, and many things. Yes, the government of Indonesia, both the central government and the local government, subnational government at the province or the district level, already make some intervention through the social assistance. Yeah, the poverty alleviation is posing not only on social assistance, but the many things. But in the term of the social assistance, the central government already spent almost 40 billion during the 5 years, and the subnational government is around hundreds trillions or around $9 billion US. But the problem is the social assistance is effective tools for reducing poverty and inequality. Yeah, the problem is on the social assistance. Yes, social assistance is one of the good intention, but the problem is after this policy, there are many district mayors or city mayors become in jail because of the corruption issues. Yes, the corruption is always those having power who commit the corruption. Okay, this is the data said that during 2001 and 2014 there are almost 3,000 corruption cases. This is corruption cases not only for social assistance, but many government expenditure. The total explicit cost is around hundreds trillions or $10 billion and total tax. This is the problem, corruption issues in Indonesia. And then the perceptions, wisdom, theoretically and empirically in the international evidence said that corruption worsens income inequality. And yeah, in Indonesia, the policy for reducing inequality is always focusing on socio-economic issues, not issues on, for example, like good governance issues. Good governance look like the separate issues, like the governance, not as a part of the anti-inequality measure. And then there is urgent needs to make the good governance or the anti-corruption policy as the tools of reducing inequality policy. So we need the evidence base here. And then the other issue is to have like a good rigorous evidence base. We need the objective measure of corruption. Most of the research on the corruption with the poverty growth, everything using the perception index. That most of the perception is coming from the business leader or the government. So this is a subjective indicator. So we need more objective one. And this is my research question. Do the social system effectively reduce inequality, and does the corruption increase inequality? And the last one is what's the best objective measure of corruption? And the contribution is on this research is introducing the objective measure of the corruption, and then providing evidence base for mainstreaming anti-corruption measure as a way to reduce inequality. This is a little bit social assistance at glance in Indonesia. Yeah, there are many data show that social assistance from the central government increasing every year, but in the subnational government until 2011, the amount of social assistance increased. But then in 2012, 2013, there is significant decrease because there is a new regulation. Let's see the regulations before 2011. The regulation is not clear about the social assistance. It's regulated by the government regulation, local finance regulation, and then there is unclear about the regulation, and the purposes of the social assistance is decided by city mayor. So the city mayor have like the powerful, they can distribute money, and then no detailed budget item. They can just allocate in the budget, and then the decision for the purpose is the city mayor. So the potential of the corruption. But under the new regulation, the social assistance should be distributed to the social rehabilitation, social protection, community empowerment, poverty alleviation, and disaster mitigation. Because of the new regulation, there is a significantly decrease in number of social assistance in Indonesia conducted by local government. And this is a national government social assistance. We have like asking rice for the poor, health insurance for the poor, scholarship for the poor, and the conditional and unconditional cash transfer. This is how the links between the corruption, social assistance, and inequality. And then just to make the simple illustration. The initial condition, for example, like this is like income from the lowest and the highest. And then, like the social assistance coming from the government, the social assistance always distributed to the lowest income group, the assumption, and then this is, so the inequalities become better with the social assistance. So the conditions become better. But if there is a corruption, and this is, for example, this is a social assistance, half goes to the lowest, and half goes to the highest, the inequality become wider. So this is a simple illustration of how the corruption and social assistance affect the inequality. But if you want more, math, so we can use the people-Dalton transfer principle that we can say that regressive transfer. Corruption is look like the regressive transfer from the lowest to the highest. So let's see that this is the range, for example, y1 until yn is like expenditure income of the society. We can see this is like the inequality measure. But if there is a social assistance, this amount, so looks like social assistance distributed to the lowest income group, and then the new inequality is become lower than the previous one. But if there is corruption, sorry, this is the same symbol, but this is look like this is corruption, the fraction of the corruption. So the lowest income group receive the less than should be, but the rest is become on the highest income group. Using this idea, we can make the simulation. That this is the simulation using the national socioeconomic survey, but it's very is not so clear because the changing from inequality is very small. So in the initial condition, if there is without the social assistance and corruption, the Gini index is 0.42. But after the social assistance, without corruption is the simulation 3 is look like the 0.41. But if there is corruption and there is social assistance, then the Gini is 0.411. So this is just a simple simulation, but here it's using the national data. But our research is not focusing on this. Our research is focusing using the subnational data. This is just simulation to show that our framework can work perfectly. This is a stylish fact about the social assistance, corruption, and inequality in Indonesia. This is I use the two objective measure of the corruption. We have the two data sets. One using the Supreme Court all judicial register, decision, and appeal, and the other one is the Supreme Court all judicial decision, inkrah, already decided. This is I found this is in the first of my research. We just having this, but last 2 weeks we got this data. So from this data we have around 20,000 data. So we extracted only the corruption related case. So yeah, this corruption is still in process, appeal, and decided. This is big data. We extract the data and then we found around 1,050 cases. This corruption is not only social assistance, but it's all the corruption cases in Indonesia. But here, in this other data set, we extracted only for corruption of social assistance. This is the corruption on social assistance. This is on the data is on Excel based, but here is like the PDF file. We have to read one by one. So we're not trying to have like the software to read the PDF file and we can extract. So we found the sample around 400. Okay, this is the mapping of the corruption in Indonesia. Yeah, I just showing you that this is the North Sumatra, West Java, Central Java, and East Java is one of the most corrupt region, or East Kalimantan. And for the first data set, we can observe that there is a negative relationship between the social assistance and inequality. There is a corruption and inequality is the positive relations, but it's not. This is not so robust, but it's still there are trend. The Gini and the corruption, there is a positive relationship. With the second data set, we also find the same things, the pattern. And then we know it's trying to propose the empirical evidence, econometric specification, and estimation. We propose to model from the first data set and the second data set. The model is quite the same, but the approach is quite different in data. But this is the empirical evidence we have that social assistance reduce poverty, reduce the inequality. But the corruption, using the explicit cost of the corruption, explicit cost is looks like the state losses, on the total fine is there is a positive relationship between the corruption and inequality with the other control variables. It's just showing you in this part. Okay, this is the first data set. What's about the second data set? Same. Even we use the difference measure of the first we just the log of the corruption total explicit cost, but this here is just using the social assistance as the ratio of the total budget. Then the first one looks like the logarithm of social assistance. But here show the same things, that the social assistance effectively reduce the inequality, but the corruption increase inequality. So with the difference control variable. But if we use the log, the corruption fine or the length of imprisonments is not significant. Even the trend is the same as the other measurement. And then what is my remark? yes, the two data sets confirm the social assistance as an effective tool for reducing inequality, but the corruption reduces its effectiveness of the assistance. And the great effort to eradicate corruption would likely have an immediate effect on decreasing inequality. So that, based on this research, I stated that policy makers should not only focus on the socio-economic issues on the tackling inequality, but introduce and mainstreaming anti-corruption measures as a way of reducing inequality in their development agenda. And then we found that the total explicit cost of the state laws of corruption is the best measure of the corruptions compared to the other measures. So this is why the forward. There are many critics. Yeah, we already present this. Many critics on this. Yeah, people say that corruption is iceberg phenomenon. The court cases are only reported one. There are many unreported corruption. And this research also, one case is treated as one sample. And yeah, we're trying to continuing the extracting data using the most effective tools, because it's time consuming to read every decision, a judicial decision, 50 pages for each decision. And then, yes, but overall, the estimation results are robust, consistent, and stable. When we estimate model using the split sample, different control variable, different measure of corruption, and that time is to finalize the question. Thank you very much.
Question and answer for Pak Arif dulu.
Thank you. This is very interesting. Just a bit of clarification because it's interesting. Can you come back to the result? So just clarification. This is a district regression.
Yes.
Okay. Can you come to the result? So the effect of social assistance is the first row. Okay, and it's significant. And the effect of the corruption is
Significant also.
which one is it?
Lack of total state losses.
Okay. So, but you conclude that the effect of social assistance is social assistance affect inequality, yes, and the corruption affect inequality.
Yeah.
But you conclude that the effect of the corruption reduce the effect of the social assistance. Just to this is just a suggestion. If you want to normally if we conclude if you want to conclude the effect of one variable affected by other variable, perhaps we can do some kind of interaction. And then can because the effect of the corruption in this case is conditional that other variable, conditional that the social assistance is the same. So if you can try that, perhaps it could be a suggestion.
Okay, thank you, Pak Arif. Yes, yeah, we should do the interactions variable between the social assistance and the corruption. But our conclusion is just indirectly because the social assistance distributed is less than, because this is like the state budget is already in the state budget, but actually that goes to the lowest income group or goes to the society is less than more. So yeah, in this research I just indirectly, but thank you very much for your suggestion to have like interactions variables. Yeah.
I'm Azlan from Malaysia. I have two questions. First is that a very broad question. I mean, many developing countries and especially lower income nations are very concerned about inequality. And in the experience of Malaysia also, we start to see some inequality appears when economy is growing. Do you believe in some optimality of inequality? Meaning that we need some inequality in order to progress. That's my first question. My second question is that I left this econometric works for quite some time, but I'm a little concerned about assigning the causality that corruption is pushing inequality higher, because I believe that if you reverse the two, you probably also see that corruption is higher when inequality is higher. So it would be good to know a bit more about what are potentially the cause of corruption, what are potentially the cause of inequality. And I believe that corruption also is taking place because the design of the program is wrong. And if the design of the program is probably can be improved, hopefully that corruption, can be avoided.
Okay, thank you very much for your suggestion and your comment. And the first question, yes, we need inequality, but not so many.
Yeah.
But
Is there any estimations of?
No, we didn't do estimation, but our in-depth interview with our student in our class of the poverty of economics in our class, our student has like a project paper. They go to the some area, and in the some area there are very poor area, but because the people are the same in the poor condition, they said that we are happy even we don't have anything. It looks like that why we have to do more, because the other people also live the same things. So we looks like a little bit need inequality, but not in certain amount, not like the 0.5 or 0.45. But maybe we also need to address what is the optimal or the maximum inequality that can induce growth. And the second one, yes, many studies said that inequality influence the inequality influence corruption. There are many studies something like that. Previously, people said that yes, because the inequality, then corruption increase. But the many study also said that corruption influence inequality. Empirical evidence in many countries. But here, this is the empirical evidence based on the framework, because our framework using the looks like the regressive transfer of the eco-development principle. So we didn't check yet about the.
Can I just quickly look at your the equation that you have just now? Yeah. One more next to it. I mean the one with I think theta, right? The one with all the equation, the Dalton, was it?
Oh, okay.
Okay. If you look at, just trying to quickly understand your equation there. That theta is basically what deducted out of corruption,
yes,
right?
Yes.
So that's my point just now. Anything that, even if it is not because of corruption, if the design of the program is causing that distributions to be wrongly targeted, I mean that's why people are talking about targeted subsidy social schemes. That itself also can trigger the inequality. I mean, I give an example. In Malaysia, we have a subsidized program for petroleum. I mean, to get gas to fill up in your car. It is a blanket for everybody. Even if the truth is actually the higher income people, they are not corrupted, but they have a lot more cars, so they fill up more gas, and therefore they get more subsidy. That actually can be theta. And therefore, you will see quite inequality coming from a wrongly designed policy.
As the same as in Indonesia, but the energy policy in Indonesia also have in Indonesia massively subsidized petroleum. But yes, of course, the wrong targeting will increase inequality. Yeah, we already tested in energy policy about the impact of subsidized petrol on the inequality. I've already did about that. Yes, the wrong targeting also increase inequality. But this framework looks like to show that there are many cases. I want to say this. We conduct this is because of this data. During 2001 and 2015, we had like 3,000 cases of the corruption. So based on this, we're trying to build a framework to show what is the impact of the corruption on inequality.
I also had a question about the causality, but I guess it was taken. So.
Okay, thanks.
This is a very exciting project, I think, because qualitatively in political science and also because we are anthropologists, we're also doing ethnography research on social assistance, and somehow it relates with the politicization of social assistance, and although it's not similar, it's very prone to clientelistic exchange in the society. But my question is not related to that, but do you what kind of social assistance that you think is prone to be corrupted? That's my first question. And secondly, in relation to good governance, and related to the previous question, I really think design of the program is very important to make sure that it's targeted wisely. I'm not using correctly because it can be interpreted differently and practiced differently in the community. But what I saw in the field, for instance, for many social assistance programs, they have a very meticulous project implementation design. So sometimes I wonder, even though they have this kind of a very meticulous and restrictive implementation design, why is it still possible to corrupt certain social assistance programs?
Okay, for the first question, what type of social assistance that mostly corrupted? Yeah, in this decision, I use, sorry, I will show you the data. In this data, yes, because our focus is just looking the keyword of bansos. Bansos is from the social assistance in Indonesia. We're just using the bantuan sosial in the judicial decision. So we didn't spell what type of bansos, but maybe good if we can divide this type of assistance. But the problem is during under 2011, the type of bansos is the type of bansos is, there are many things because depend on the decision of the city mayor. But after 2011 or starting from 2012, the social assistance, like the subnational government social assistance, is directed to only social rehabilitation, social protection, community empowerment, poverty alleviation, and disaster mitigation. This is more clear regulation compared to the previous one. Previous one is all of the assistance depend on the city mayor. So the city mayor will decide everything. That's why in that condition there are many city mayors become in jail. And then about your question, yeah, it's very difficult to answer because even there is still regulation, clear regulation of the social estate with this amount of program, but still power tend to corrupt. So who has the power trying to commit in corruption activities. So I could not answer clearly your question. Thank you.
My question is about what you plan to do with this data once the study's finished. So you've collected this data. Hopefully people who read it will find it compelling. What process do you then foresee in using this data to actually mobilize change in the social policy?
Yeah, I think so. Because this is like our new project in our research group. Yeah, there is. I think there are two institutions in Indonesia who trying to mobilize data on corruption. The first is massively conducted by Gadjah Mada University in Yogyakarta. Already released the data, looks like this. Sorry, Gadjah Mada University trying to release this type of data. You can download it. The data is not only from the provincial level, but in the district level, like regency level. There is a data, corruption cases, like total fine, total explicit cost of the corruption, and also the length of imprisonment. But the problem is the data is not so detailed. But our focus is not data on the social system cases, the corruption on the social system. So we read once by one every decision, incorrect decision. So yeah, we try after we finish the paper, we would like to share the data itself.
Oh, and how, I guess my question is, how are you planning to share the data? What mechanisms are you using to influence the government with the data?
With this data, influence the government, yeah, maybe I don't have plan yet. But I think after I finish the paper, I will have like the disseminate the result with the Bappenas. There's people from the Bappenas, also with our ministry of not ministry, the national plan, social affairs, sharing the idea.
This map is interesting because
Yeah.
if I may suggest,
Yeah.
can you check on the inequality
Yeah.
where there is no corruption?
Oh, this is we also.
But, I mean, there are areas that there is less corruption, right?
Yeah. For example, like the Yogyakarta, the delta Gini is 0.05, less corruption. But for example, like Central Java, there are many cases of the corruption. The increasing Gini is 0.1.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That is the point. I mean,
Yeah.
which one is trigger which one? I suspect that the areas that have less corruption is also actually the areas where
Less.
inequality is
Yeah.
less.
Yeah.
It's very interesting.
Yeah.
I think time is finished now. We have to move to the third presenter.
Okay.
So thank you very
Thank you very much.
Good morning. This is a work in progress with my advisor, Paul Ferraro at Johns Hopkins University. So after we're talking about poverty, all these previous two panels, this paper is trying to see whether there is an ecological footprint of poverty alleviation programs in Indonesia. I'm using the case here from conditional cash transfers in Indonesia. Conditional cash transfers in Indonesia has just implemented in 2007 as a pilot program. What it means by pilot program is they assign which area got conditional cash transfer by random assignment. So then they can evaluate whether there is an effect of this poverty alleviation program. Okay. So let me begin about the distribution of tropical rainforests in the world. So tropical rainforests are very important because it's a source of carbon storage and sequestration, also biodiversity protection and hydrological conservation. And then if you look at the distribution of most tropical rainforests in the world, most likely they are in the developing countries with low or middle income regions. So these countries usually predominantly focus more about poverty alleviation program and then fulfilling the MDGs goals. And what they less concerned about is the conservation. So I'm trying to see here using the conditional cash transfer program whether there is an effect of poverty alleviation to increasing in deforestation. So conditional cash transfer programs is viewed as one of the best targeted poverty alleviation program following the successful of Oportunidades in Mexico and Bolsa Familia in Brazil. And then one over half of the 30 tropical countries with the most forest cover now have conditional cash transfers. And then why I choose Indonesia is because Indonesia has the third world's largest forest area, but Indonesia also the second largest net forest cover loss between 2000 and 2005. And in 2007, as I mentioned before, Indonesia implemented this program as a pilot randomized project, and then in 2012 it covers already 1.4 until 1.5 million of households. And the evaluation of the random pilot project, it says that it does increase average monthly expenditure of the poor by 10%. So one might wonder, maybe they increase the monthly expenditure, but how about the cost? Because health and then education are not free in Indonesia, so you still have to pay certain amount of health and education. And based on the calculation by Triana, it says that PKH transfers almost cover 50% of the cost. So there is still increase in income. So our basic hypothesis is how deforestation and poverty interlinked together is increase in income by this poverty alleviation program actually makes more room for them to increase either the demand of more land-intensive use products, or they actually cut more forests to actually convert the forest as an agricultural land. So that is the goal of this. So this is my identification strategy. So what I'm trying to compare here is the sub-district, which is the area that is assigned by this program, and then compare it to the area that is not being assigned yet. So I'm using this as matching. So basically this is what I'm going to do. So I have the treated districts, which is the sub-district that get assigned as PKH, and then I have a couple of untreated districts, sub-districts, I'm sorry. And then I'm trying to see match these sub-districts, so they will be a counterfactual, a good counterfactual for the treated one. So this is my identification strategy. And how am I going to match it? So I'm going to match it using these covariates, because my outcome, my goal here is to see whether there is more or less forest loss, if there is more poverty, if there is an assignment of poverty alleviation program in that area. So my outcome will be the forest loss T+1, which is a year after the assignment of the program, because I'm counting for a lag time here. Because when people get money, it's they need time to actually prioritize what they're going to spend on. And then the covariates here are, I'm trying to match the forest loss of this area, pre-treatment periods, which is pre-assignment of TKH, and then factors that affecting forest loss as well, such as elevation, and then poverty, and then population. And also these, the covariates that actually can affect the assignment of PKH, because the assignment of this conditional cash transfer called PKH is not random. So I'm trying to predict what variables that can predict this assignment to certain sub-districts. And then here is the data. I'm using forest loss data from Hansen data, so it's satellite mapping data. So rather than the registered land data that government has, I'm using satellite mapping with the threshold of 25%. So more than 25% canopy cover, I categorize it as forest. And then this figure here, trying to see that the blue polygon, which shows you the village boundaries, that I will sum up to sub-districts boundaries, because the area of my area I'm interested in the sub-districts rather than villages. So sub-districts is summation of villages. And then I already removed the concessions area. So because my basic hypothesis is this forest loss that comes from the program, so I have to remove those areas that most likely not going to be affected by this program, because conditional cash transfers only target to the lowest 8% of the poorest in the national income distribution. concessions area, I removed the concessions area, which denoted here as the pink polygon. And then here is the preliminary results from the matching that I did using the forest cover loss. So, for example, here is Nangro Aceh Darussalam is one of the provinces in Indonesia. So the first assignment of PKH in Nangro Aceh Darussalam is in 2008. So I'm matching the pre-treatment of net forest cover loss from the 3 years period. So it starts at 2005 until 2008. Here you can see here from the graph, maybe it's not clear. So the upper line will be the unmatched, untreated, and then the lower line, the lower line, the red line will be the matched, untreated, and then the treated one will be the green one. So after matching, it looks like it's getting better rather than unmatched. And then what we're trying to see is whether there is a divergence after the assignment of PKH. And here is less clear from this graph what if this divergence from net forest cover loss will be significantly different or not. But here I show you the covariates that I matched. I'm trying to see whether this type of balances, whether before the assignment of the PKH, they are significantly different or not. So U here will be denoting unmatched, and then M will denote matched treated and untreated. So after matching, there are some variables that are still significantly different, but that is the problem for most propensity score matching. We cannot balance on all of the covariates here. But here, the most important thing here is in the forest loss, because that is my optimal outcome. So in the forest loss T minus 3 until 3 minus 1, before we see that there are 3 stars in the unmatched observations, which means that they are significantly different. And then after matching, they are not significantly different. And then here are the other covariates, and I'm going to add up all of the match observations and then sum up over an island, which is Sumatra. So it consists of 10 provinces in Sumatra. After I summed up, and then I'm doing a panel regression with fixed effect. Why I use this estimation? Because I believe that there is certain characteristics within sub-district that is time constant that should be removed, because that might affect my outcome variables and also the assignment of PKH. So here is the results for fixed effect panel design for Sumatra. It turns out that PKH here, the coefficient is positive, which is 23.669. So it means that the assignment of PKH, whether these sub-districts get PKH or not, will increase forest cover loss by 24 square meters. So it's it's quite small. It's not that large. And then its significance at 10%. And then I only control, because sub-district level, it's a bit difficult to find time varying covariates. So right now I have only forest cover. As I mentioned, this is only preliminary results. So I'm really welcoming for any suggestions that can give me variation of time varying covariates. And I use Giordani's and fixed effect. And my conclusion will be, so there is an early evidence of the ecological footprint of poverty alleviation in Indonesia, but it's okay, it's small. And then what's next? It's actually, right now I cannot say anything about the mechanism through which this PKH can affect the deforestation. And what my next step is to complement this study, this quantitative study, I'm going to do more on the survey and interview to see what is more likely to be happening on the ground, because I don't have that information yet. But from early survey on forests in Indonesia, there is some indications that poor people do burn forests to convert it to agricultural land. And then what is there to compare to any other studies? Using the oportunidades in Mexico, Alex Garcia already measured that there is actually an ecological footprint from poverty alleviation program that actually increase or doubling the probability that any deforestations occur in the localities. And then is it possible to implement poverty alleviation program but still do the conservation? There's no empirical evidence yet that I know of, but there is anecdotal evidence from Brazil. Brazil has been very successful in curtailing their deforestation since 2004 because they implement a very large anti-deforestation policy called PCDM. And they also implemented a very advanced conditional cash transfers in the name of all South Media. So it does seem that it can work. So what next would be the policy recommendation to more informing policy in Indonesia, policy in Indonesia, that we do need to focus in conservation as well. So, thank you.
Only 5 minutes.
Could you explain a little bit more about the cash transfer program in Indonesia, and what is it tied in any way with the idea that they're paying people to conserve the forest or to do anything, or is it just a cash transfer?
So this particular conditional cash transfer that I'm talking about is household conditional cash transfer. So they've been given cash transfers conditional on they having a pregnant woman or children, and then they are required to bring their children to school, to enroll in the school, or for pregnant women they have to have regular checkups.
No conditionality in terms of the forest or
No,
anything?
this one is not.
Okay.
So this is not protected by this one.
And it's under the Ministry of Social Affairs.
Pardon?
Under the Ministry of Social Affairs.
That's
or-
right, correct.
Yeah, well, I am really looking forward to your field work because my experience is reverse. I mean,
Okay.
I have no idea of data, but because you picked Aceh Nangro as an example, I have seen people buy a sing salt to go and do illegal logging as soon as they receive their unconditional or conditional. Finally, their wife's pregnant, and they can so
it is in the direction that I'm saying?
yes, but people use the cash transfer in many different ways.
That's right.
It's very, I don't know, I don't see very well how you relate, because you seem to think that deforestation is related to slash and burn. Whereas again, in my experience in Aceh, the forest decrease is related to Kalapasat, to what's palm or oil palm.
Okay.
So, which is not related to cash transfer.
But I already removed the concessions one. Is that your concern, the oil palm concessions? I already removed those areas that are within the oil palm concessions.
The small ones as well?
Okay, that's not, yeah.
So it's,
that's what I'm saying.
I think that it's going to be very interesting when you go on field work
That's right.
and see what really happens on the edge of the forest with these cash transfers.
Thank you.
So it's very
Yes.
stimulating.
I will be perfect.
Quick one. You mentioned about the conditional cash transfers, about getting kids to school and this kind of program, which is very much familiar in many places.
That's right.
Do you have any idea how conditional cash transfers can be used to discourage deforestation? Is there any idea about it?
Yes, actually, this is a reduced form, as you can see, regression. So from the hypothesis, it can lead to both ways, whether it's increasing deforestation or decreasing. So I'm going to give you one reference, which is Foster and Rosenwig in 2003. So they find that the increase in income in India actually increase forest cover, which means decrease deforestations. How they do it is because they demand more on wood products. They use wood as a source of combustion for cooking. So because they increase their income, they actually plant more forests because it's the source of the cooking. So actually forest cover can increase. But
Yeah,
it's going to be in the long run.
I think, I mean, that link is a bit kind of detour going to the other way around. But is there a program that would go directly at targeting deforestation? Yeah, is there any direct program like that?
So this one is not. So this one is only, I'm only measuring the variations within this program, conditional cash transfers. But you're right, I think you're talking about payment for environmental services.
Something like that, yeah.
Yes, that I haven't included in here. I think it will be a concern in my model if this same overlapping conditional cash transfer programs will expose to different payment for environmental services, have different exposure. But if they're not systematically different, systematically the same, then I think it won't be a problem with this identification strategy. Is that answering your question?
Good.
Thank you. Is there any other question? Yes?
Thank you for the presentation. I was just wondering, from the question about how people use the cash transfers, did you, meaning that if a family has more children or is pregnant, then they would get a cash transfer. Did you use a variable as a covariate of the number of births?
Okay, so thank you. That is actually quite interesting questions because the hypothesis is increasing in population from children, having more children, actually increasing deforestation. But here my unit of analysis is the sub-district itself, and then in the matching covariates, I match for the eligible, which is the number of households that are eligible for PKH program in that area. So because PKH targeted more on the households, so I think in that case, I don't think that will be a problem in my identification strategy. It will increase, if this program increase pregnancy differently in some areas and in the others, then I will be concerned of this model. But if they increase pregnancy at the same way, like because people are rational, you get more money if you get pregnant, then in the same, in all of the area that already get PKH, then it wouldn't be a problem in this model. I think, will that be answering your question? Thank you. Yes?
Yes, I enjoyed that, thank you. I'm wondering, sorry if I missed it from earlier, can you tell us a little bit about the next stage of the research? I mean, how are you going to select your sites for in-depth investigation? I'm picking up from the question here. I can see so many different factors impacting upon the relationship between conditional cash transfers and deforestation. And even back to the last paper on corruption, you know, districts which have high levels of corruption which then open up spaces for deforestation, others where maybe, and so on and so forth. So how are you going to select your areas?
So is this my sampling, or
Yeah.
how am I going to do
Well,
it?
sort of both. I mean, are you going to do a comparison between different regions or ecological zones, or are you going to, what's your strategy?
The strategy. So actually this is still in preliminary stages because we just got the results as well. I think what we have in mind right now is we are going to select it from the forest areas first, and then random sampling from the forest areas, and after from the forest areas, random sampling from the treated sub-districts, and random sampling from the controlled sub-districts within the forest areas. So that is, I think, 2 levels of, because we don't have that many observations in the treated one, so I think 2 stage of clustering would be enough for this.
And you're doing household surveys, are you?
So that is
more ethnographic work?
it's more onto the head of sub-districts rather than the households, because
So
right
we'll
now I
interview
don't
key
have
informants for you.
Pardon?
We'll interview key informants as
Yes,
a way of...
key informants, yes, head of sub-districts. Because it's, the region is not sub-districts, I don't think it's, sorry. It's based on the summary statistics. Sub-districts are not that large enough, so head of sub-districts knows the informations within that sub-districts. have the information, the capability to answer that question. Is that your concern? Well,
Yeah.
Can you tell me? I'm looking for feedback here, so please do.
I mean, I would have thought it'd be very interesting to go to at the household level or even to the individual level, to look at the way in which, for example, male and female headed households will have different opportunities for deforestation or using cash transfers, the way in which the life course
That's
will
right.
impact upon these things, people, I mean, all these sorts of things. So I would have thought that if you looked at sub-district heads,
They want.
I would see it as a kind of first stage. I would say you need to go to the next stage. But I mean, I take,
Yeah.
I'm not an
That would be
economist, so
ideal.
I'm more, yeah.
Thank you.
But anyway.
I know, I've been thinking about this as well. It's just, I'm not sure, I'm not sure. I already tried to get a list of the households that are poor, but it's very, very sensitive data, so I cannot get the list of the recipients or the one that is categorized as poor in that sub-district. So that's why I choose to interview the head of sub-district. So, but thank you. That will be my ideal focus, survey. Thank you. Is there any other questions? Are we? Oh, sorry. I think we're over time. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you everybody for the very interesting discussion in this session. We run out of time and then I think I just make a very few wrap-up. The first discussion is, the conclusion is that based on the measurement of the monetary value is basically is not enough to measure the poverty. And the second part, the basic conclusion is that government approach is also important to make the policy on reducing inequality being success. And the last one is the decades is looks like more debating because there is the preliminary findings that the impact factor in the administration. I think that's all for all of us. So thank you very much.
Thank you.